To AWANI tonight with me, Cynthia Ng. Emergency ordinances revoked 2 months after emergency ended. And Law Minister assures government will investigate Pandora Papers. That's coming up. The Dewan Rakyat has officially revoked 7 emergency ordinances today. It was passed unanimously with a voice vote after MPs debated the issue 2 months after the emergency ended.
The emergency intended to curb the COVID-19 pandemic was first declared in January. Early this month, Wan Junaidi confirmed that while the emergency had ended in August, the ordinances would still apply until February 2022. In July, former Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin's administration came under fire after the Yang di-Pertuan Agong expressed disappointment for revoking it without his consent and wanted the matter to go through a debate in Parliament.
With the emergency ordinances annulled, penalties imposed on those caught breaking COVID-19 rules and regulations will revert to their original values.
During the emergency, amendments to the Prevention and Control of Infectious Diseases Act 1988 or Act 342 raised compounds to a maximum of 10,000 ringgit for individuals and 50,000 ringgit for companies. The values of the compound will now be lowered back to the maximum of 1,000 ringgit under Act 342. Meanwhile, those who had been found guilty under the emergency ordinances will continue to serve the jail sentence even though the ordinances have been revoked. Deputy Home Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Muhammad Said said this was provided for under Article 150 of the Federal Constitution.
The Cabinet has decided to set another date for the tabling of the bill to amend provisions in the Federal Constitution relating to Malaysia Agreement 1963 or MA63. De facto Law Minister Datuk Sri Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar said this is because no consensus on the proposed amendments was reached during an engagement session with the Prime Minister yesterday.
He said the new date would then be determined after a briefing by the Attorney General on the matter at the Cabinet meeting on Friday, adding that the decision was made to ensure that the bill would obtain full support from all ministers. The original plan was for the amendments to be tabled on Tuesday and then debated for the second reading on Thursday. Meanwhile, Pakatan Harapan has expressed disappointment over the government's decision to postpone the tabling of the bill.
Datuk Sri Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar gave his assurance that the relevant government agencies would be instructed to start investigating the revelations made in the Pandora Papers. He also said the results of the investigations would be handed over to Parliament once ready.
Saya bagi jaminan kepada Yang Berhormat. Saya akan jemput semua agensi-agensi yang Berhormat sebut tadi, iaitu SPRM, Bank Negara, Commercial Crime Police Department dan pihak-pihak lain untuk memberi arahan daripada Perdana Menteri supaya penyiasatan dilaksanakan sebagaimana yang saya sebut di perangan 11 jawapan saya tadi.
Wan Junaidi was answering a question from opposition leader Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, who asked the Prime Minister to state the government's plan of action on the Pandora Papers exposés, which had named several prominent Malaysians. The use of the offshore accounts is not fundamentally a crime, but Wan Junaidi said action will be taken if any criminal evidence is linked to any individuals or companies. The minister said the MACC had not initiated investigations into the Pandora Papers reports, but the commission was in the process of obtaining further information.
Pejuang will not contest in the upcoming Malacca state election. Its chairman, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, announced that they will also not help campaign for any other party.
In a press conference, he said this is another political ploy for politicians to lobby for important positions in the government instead of improving the state's administration.
Pejuang tidak ingin terlibat dengan gejala seperti ini. Kita tidak akan ambil bahagian dan kita percaya bahawa walau siapa juga yang dipilih untuk mendiri kerajaan, keadaannya sama. Tak akan ada perubahan. Kerana mereka ini yang akan bertanding bukan memikir tentang apa yang mereka boleh buat untuk memajukan negeri Melaka, tapi sebaliknya untuk mereka dapat jawatan, dapat gaji yang baik itu.
What conditions must prevail to make an election free and fair? And will this be present in the upcoming Malacca state elections? Tonight on Consider This, we ask our guests if recent restrictions and campaigning SOPs will have an impact. We'll go for a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Budget 2022 must focus on strengthening the public healthcare delivery in both facilities and human capital. President of Association of Private Hospitals Malaysia, Dr. Kuljit Singh, said the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the need for accessible healthcare, especially to those who cannot afford basic healthcare.
The only problem with public hospitals is because they are not able to see the patients on a particular schedule because of the huge number of patients. If you can improve their facilities, improve the waiting period in a public hospital, those who cannot afford should be able to get good treatment from the public hospital, and let the private hospitals be for those who can afford it, who want the extra frills, who want to see their doctors according to their timing, and also to be more precise in what they actually require. But that all will come with a cost. But I think if the public sector can provide a good, accessible healthcare for the rakyat, then there will not be a reason for people who cannot afford trying to look for treatment in the private sector. So I think that's the gap that we need to close. And I don't think that gap is too difficult to close. It is just that they need to restructure their processes, have more budget for it, and I'm sure it can be achievable. We are a small country, 32 million people in this country. I don't think that will be too much of an effort to do that. And it's just to retain the human capital in the public sector and enhance the facilities. And wherever the facilities cannot be enhanced, private is willing to help out in a public-private partnership.
Kuljit added that the successful public-private healthcare partnerships seen during the COVID-19 pandemic should be synergized in order to ease burdens on the public healthcare moving forward.
Malaysia will reopen its international borders to tourists through a pilot project in Langkawi starting November 15th. Giant Menon from ECS Yusof Ishak Institute welcomes the move and believes that Malaysia should not wait any further to expand its quarantine-free travel, as economic recovery hinges on opening borders as soon as possible.
We cannot keep the Delta variant or any other variant, future or past, we cannot keep them out with border measures. The only thing that will protect us in the end is better domestic protocols. That's the evidence. Of course, the perceptions can vary because we first got this virus by importing it. So people, I think, still fear that this is going to happen over and over again. That's not the evidence. The thing that we need to focus on is balancing the risks of international movement versus domestic movement. With a highly transmissible variant like Delta, it is almost impossible to import it in large numbers to match the domestic transmission rate. It's all a matter of balancing risks, but if we open to countries with high vaccination rates and low infection rates and still do testing before and after arrival, then I think the risks are very manageable and the economic benefits are very clear.
A quarantine-free travel lane with Singapore should be prioritized, followed by other countries with low rate of infection.
There's a huge level of interdependency and great benefits for both countries by opening that border. Singapore has a very high vaccination rate like Malaysia. Both countries are dealing with community outbreaks, so I'm not too sure what they're trying to keep out. The closing of borders here is not really serving any real purpose, except to further batter a battered economy. It'll be great if you could have an ASEAN travel bubble or balloon, but I don't think that is likely anytime soon, because a lot of these countries are not willing to allow their citizens to return home without quarantine at home. So the countries that are allowing their citizens to do that are in Europe and North America. And so this is why Singapore, for instance, has opened up these lanes with so many European countries, because travelers are more likely to come here if they don't have to quarantine at both ends.
Indonesia's President Joko Widodo is pushing for travel to reopen in Southeast Asia. ASEAN, he said, needs to hit its target to vaccinate 70% of over 650 million population as soon as possible, so that economies could reopen safely.
Jika semua negara ASEAN segera memfasilitasi mobilitas masyarakat dengan aman, roda ekonomi bisa kembali bergerak. Indonesia juga telah membuka secara bertahap Bali untuk safe tourism dengan protokol kesehatan yang ketat.
Jokowi has been pushing for a regional travel corridor arrangement since late last year. Instead, each country has set up bilateral deals with nations around the world, with Singapore reopening to North America and Europe, while Thailand removed quarantine rules for 46 countries while excluding Indonesia. Jokowi was speaking at the three-day ASEAN Annual Summit, opened earlier on Monday by Brunei's Sultan Hassan al-Bolkiah, the chair of ASEAN. The talks will be joined by US President Joe Biden and the leaders of China and Russia, and are expected to spotlight Myanmar's worsening crisis, the pandemic, as well as security and economic issues. Sudan's military declared a state of emergency hours after forces arrested the acting prime minister and other civilian leaders. General Abdel Fattah Burhan announced that he was dissolving the country's ruling sovereign council, as well as the government led by Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok. He said quarrels among political factions prompted the military to intervene, but he pledged to complete the country's democratic transition. Sudan's military and civilian leaders have been at odds since former autocrat ruler Omar al-Bashir was overthrown 2 years ago. A transitional government was set up soon after. Unrest erupted in capital Khartoum as the country's largest political party, the Umma Party, called on people to take to the streets in resistance. Internet in the country was largely cut off, while images have appeared on social media showing angry crowds burning tires in the streets. Military forces have also reportedly closed off major bridges, roads and Khartoum's airport, while international flights have been suspended. That is all we have for you on AWANI Tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and Astro AWANI app. I'm Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching.